When experts analyze a person's statement of what he or she witnessed or did, the experts say that the simple sentence is more likely a true one. I didn't eat the cookie. Subject, verb, object. When people try to cloud the truth or lie, they often say a lot more than subject, verb, object. How dare you say I ate the cookie? I would never do that. How rude can you get? Experts say, he very possibly ate the cookie. When the statement is longer or more complex, it is the added words that often give them away. It is much harder on people with a conscience if they lie while stating a simple sentence. So when I'm searching for what really happened in the 1800s regarding the creation of Codex Sinaiticus, I'm looking for the simple statements. I want to find as many simple statements as I can and then do what I can in the present day to verify them. First, I'll list for you the 4 levels of certainty and the 4 guidelines that I used while looking for the truth. Then I'll summarize what Constantine Simonides said was the history of his great uncle Benedict. And I'll tell you what I found to verify it or cast doubt on that history. Then I'll show you where I found that information so you can check for yourselves. After that, I will add the facts together to create an hypothesis about what I think were Uncle Benedict's real reasons for creating the Codex Sinaiticus. You may want the subtitles on. There's a lot of data here. Hi, I'm David Daniels from Chick Publications. For a century and a half, books and teachers have said that Constantine Tischendorf found the world's oldest Bible in an Orthodox monastery in the desert of Egypt. Tischendorf named it Codex Sinaiticus. But one man, Constantine Simonides, said, no, I made that Bible. I created it for my Uncle Benedict. Why would a Byzantine Orthodox monk like Benedict create an anti-Orthodox Alexandrian Bible? For over 150 years, scholars and textbooks have dismissed Simonides' claim as lies. They claimed that Constantine Simonides made up people and events. That's what I once thought, but I had to know where he lied. Did he ever tell the truth? How would I find out over 150 years later? When a person makes up dates, names, places, events, people, there's a lot of details. They could easily make mistakes. So why don't we look for Simonides' mistakes then? And if he lied, where did he lie? But if we find out he told the truth, then we really should admit it. In this video, I want to see if I can verify what Simonides said about his great uncle Benedict. To do this, I have 4 levels of certainty and 4 guidelines. Here are my 4 levels of certainty. 1, historically verified. I have other evidence that reasonably proves the events happened the way they were described. 2, historically justified. The evidence doesn't prove that the events happened that way, but that it makes perfect sense that they would have. 3, historically probable. It is reasonable and may be likely that the events could have happened in that or a similar way, but there's not enough information to say it's what happened. 4, historically possible. It was not impossible that it happened, but there isn't enough evidence to lead you to any conclusion. There are 4 guidelines I use on what Simonides or whoever testified. 1, corroborating witness. If I find an eyewitness who was there, or an institution with good historical information that agrees that an event happened, then that is a testimony in, say, Simonides' favor. 2, detailed knowledge. If I find that Simonides had detailed information about a place or event that most people likely would not have, that is an indication that either Simonides was there or that information came from someone who was there. 3. Time-specific knowledge. If I find that Simonides lists events that happened for a limited amount of time within a narrow time frame, and the story lists specifics that were not common knowledge, that indicates that either Simonides was there at that time or that information came from someone who was there in that limited time frame. 4. Consistent actions or events. If someone's story tells about a person doing something that I can historically find him doing in another place around that time, then we can say this event is consistent with his behavior and therefore plausible. The higher we're able to go up the list, the more probable or the more certain we'll be as far as we're able to tell in 2018. Why is this important? Realize that most of our professors, Bible teachers, and ministers were taught to believe the lies about Tischendorf. We were expected to believe the story about the great Tischendorf and his discovery of Sinaiticus, the world's oldest and best Bible. It can get you ridiculed or even fired from some positions to even question it. I'm not telling you that your professor is wrong and you must believe me. I'm telling you that your professor was taught wrong and proving it. We're building a foundation for a body of evidence to get to the truth. I will quote what Simonides wrote. I'll show you what I found when I looked it up, and I'll show you where I found it right on your screen. Constantine Simonides, on January 21st, 1863, wrote to the Guardian newspaper, largely responding to a man named William Aldous Wright. He's another story entirely. Wright copied down a summary of Simonides' statements about his great Uncle Benedict and himself. It's filled with statements that Simonides wants the reader to believe are facts. Are they? Let's find out. Various parts of Simonides' letter were reprinted in 2 places: the Christian Remembrancer and the Journal of Sacred Literature and Biblical Record. When I first read Simonides' story a number of years ago, I thought he was making up the names, dates, and places. After all, who could verify what Simonides said? Many of the people were dead. Cities were destroyed. Evidence would have been hard to find to see whether he told the truth. Another thing, what reason would I have to doubt W.A. Wright? I have some of his books on the King James. Then there's Frederick Scribner. He published a Greek text to go with the King James Bible, and his book said Simonides was a con man. These guys couldn't be wrong about Simonides, could they? How could I find out whether he really was a con man or not? Remember these principles. Liars lie even when they have nothing to lose by telling the truth. Honest people tell the truth, even if they've got lots to gain by lying. It would take something pretty big to get a generally honest person to lie. So, which is Simonides? Let's take Simonides' words as we read them in English in the Christian Remembrancer. Ready? Quote, "First, that my Uncle Benedict, being by profession a theologian and versed in 12 languages, intending to publish both the Old and New Testaments and the writing of the Apostolic Fathers with exegetic scholia of the ancient commentators, and specially to reply to what had been written against the Septuagint, began this work while professor in the College of Cayden in the year 1784. Let's take this apart. Is Simonides telling the truth? If he were making things up, it would be easy to mix up his dates, places, events, and people. It turned out that I was wrong about Simonides. There really was a college of Kyden, or Kydonia, or Ivalic, or Ibali. It was started in 1780 as a smaller school in the courtyard of Virgin of the Orphans Church, or Panagia ton Orphanon. It turns out those buildings were not destroyed in 1821 after all. The Muslims took them over and still use them today. A number of pictures were either found or taken in 2013 by Dr. Emmanuel Paraskos of Emerson College when he was searching for his roots on Ibali. He actually went to the city and found the places. This is the school for boys. The school buildings still exist, but Paraskos noted they were enlarged a bit since then. By 1800, the school had really expanded under Benjamin Lesbos. This guy. It was made a full-out academy with printing press, scientific equipment, and top-notch scholars, and it was moved to the north side of town. More evidence is in the Encyclopedia of the Hellenic World. According to the 1827 Monthly Review, the college, see it for yourself, I'll make it bigger, became the most frequented of the East. And though Kydonia was in Muslim Ottoman Asia Minor, its inhabitants were entirely Greeks. At this point, Simonides told us Benedict's goals as he knew them: to publish an Old and New Testament, a Bible, together with the writings of the Apostolic Greek Church Fathers with commentary. That's a huge product. It would take years to prepare it. And Simonides told us the reason: to prove how good the Greek Septuagint was to unnamed people who were writing against the Septuagint. Who were these unnamed people? Followers of Orthodox and Catholic religion loved the Septuagint. The Catholic Latin Vulgate was largely based upon the Septuagint. That's in my Septuagint series and the book, Did Jesus Use the Septuagint? So, who was Benedict talking about? There were two groups that were against the Orthodox Septuagint for completely different reasons. Bible-believing Protestants and Baptists, well, they knew the Septuagint isn't God's words. They trusted the preserved Hebrew Old Testament. They were against the Greek Septuagint and its changed words and added stories. And of course, they trust the preserved Greek New Testament. But as I showed you in the video, Simonides portrayed Part 4, Raising Rebels. There was another movement. It was made up of Masons, revolutionaries, and Enlightenment thinkers, so-called. They knew that the current Orthodox Septuagint didn't support their narrative. They wanted a narrative of man rising to godhood. They were against the Greek Septuagint, which shows God becoming a man and shows Jesus as eternally God. But a Bible could be made with Gnostic texts to teach this man-to-God narrative. Now, if only there were a manuscript collector who could create such a Bible. That would revolutionize, pardon the pun, the whole Orthodox religion. Benedict started teaching in Kydonia, or Ivalic, or Ibali, in the 4th year of the school, 1784, while still a teenager. This was a regular practice with schools of the day. While he was younger, he would have taught orphan children. Then he would teach adults when he got older and became more educated himself. Adults meaning, teens, high school age and up. I'll show you that Benedict was one of the teachers in a bit, but under a different name. The Greek schools in Asia Minor were filled with European Enlightenment thinking. And this thinking got the schools in hot water with the established Orthodox religion in Constantinople. So if Benedict taught at Cadonia, then he was teaching Enlightenment thought, not Orthodox religion. Now let's continue with what Simonides wrote. Having removed to Mount Athos in 1819 for the sake of retirement and embraced the monastic life in the monastery of Esphigmenos, he was named Benedict. For surely they who adopt the monastic life ought to change themselves and their names as well as their lives, having formerly had two names, Basileus and Bessarion. 1. If Benedict retired in 1819, it means he taught for 35 years. That's very reasonable. My mom taught elementary school for 30 years before she retired, plus practice teaching years and getting her bachelor's and master's degree. That is plausible. It was also plausible, number 2, to retire to a monastery like Esphigmenou, because, as it is said in that 1827 monthly review, the monasteries of Mount Athos and others formed another substitute for colleges or seminaries. So former professors retiring to become monks and even teaching on the peninsula called Mount Athos were not an unusual event. But teacher Bessarion retired and took on the monastic name Benedict to do more textual studies and not to teach. And Esphigmenou had a number of moldering manuscripts for him to investigate. Note how 3. Simonides said Benedict's two names before he became a monk were Basileus and Bessarion. The B in modern Greek has become a V, so Bessarion would be Bessarion. According to Simonides' biography by Charles Stewart, Simonides' mom and family were from the island of Symi, northeast of the Isle of Rhodes. And Benedict, Bessarion, was the uncle of Simonides' mother, Mary. That would make him Great Uncle Benedict. Now, look at the Encyclopedia of the Hellenic World. Same article about Ivalic, Cadonia. It lists the teachers in the school, which started in 1780, being incorporated in 1800. In the school, where there was also a library, taught Bessarion of Symi. I found Bessarion of Symi listed in other articles of the Encyclopedia and even a Greek blog on the Academy of Cadonia. So for 35 years, Bessarion of Symi taught before he retired in 1819 and became a monk at the monastery of Esphigmenou on Mount Athos. And it was just in time, too. On June 15th, 1821, the people of Ivalic, Cadonia were massacred by Muslim Ottomans trying to squash the Greek rebellion against their rule. This was in the first year of the War for Greek independence. Now let's check the next part of Simonides' statement. While at Athos, he, that is Benedict, gave himself up particularly to the study of the sacred scriptures. He collected the most ancient manuscripts of both testaments and of their commentators, and at considerable expense prepared his work for the press. That is perfectly plausible. Benedict Bessarion was well known and well loved. His retirement was like my professor's retirements have been: continued study and writing. So Bessarion, now Benedict, continued to gather manuscripts of the Bible and ancient Greek so-called church fathers to make his big life goal come to pass. He'd have nothing but time except for one thing. Here's what Simonides said next. The Greek Revolution interfered. He withdrew after a little time to the island of Hydra, hence to Cythera, thence to Patsaris, and finally to Calabria, now Paros, where there's a famous monastery of the Virgin in which he remained a long time, teaching theology to 12 Greek youths by the command of Capodistrias, governor of Greece. 1. Benedict had been at Esphigmenou Monastery since 1819. The Greek Revolution started under 2 years later on February 22nd, 1821. It spread quickly. The Ottomans moved all over to stop the revolt. 2. The Isle of Hydra was a defensive position for the Greeks during the war. It is perfectly plausible that Benedict would go there for safety. Remember, he taught ideas in line with the revolutionaries, Masonry, and so-called Enlightenment. 3. Cythera is a strategic island and another safe place off the southeastern tip of the Peloponnese Peninsula of Greece, the furthest south of the 6 main Ionian islands. Patsaris must be Spetses, an island that rebelled along with Hydra, also called Pichusa. They had a naval fleet just like Hydra. Benedict taught at Spetses in 1828. Calabria is Calabria. Paros is Poros. Calabria and Poros are sister islands, now just called Poros on maps. They are on the other side of the peninsula from Spetses. They are also south of Aegina Island. I'll tell you about that in the next video. The monastery, number 6, that Benedict taught at is called Moni Zoodoku Pigis Calabrias, the holy monastery of the life-giving fountain of Calabria. This refers to their doctrine that Mary was the mother, or one who gave birth to, God. 12 or 15 Greek youths were taught at the secondary school, started at this monastery in the Eastern Wing. It was the first ecclesiastical secondary school, founded in 1830 by the command of Ioannis Capodistrias, the first governor of independent Greece. Capodistrias, number 8, used Poros since at least 1828. It is said that he received strength during the war by his devotion to the Mary icon at the Zoodoku Pigis Monastery. Capodistrias set up the first Greek navy at Poros. He also used Poros to meet with ambassadors from Great Britain, France, and Russia to negotiate what the borders of independent Greece would be. In 1830, Simonides' great uncle Benedict sent a letter to Capodistrias asking that his native Symi and other islands be included in the borders of the new independent Greece. He may have actually handed the letter to Capodistrias. I mean, it looks like they are in the same building. But the other nations didn't agree. So Symi and the other Dodecanese islands remained under Ottoman control for another 80 years. Here's the last section we'll cover of Simonides' 1863 letter. After the assassination of the governor, he again removed to Mount Athos, where he continued until his death. On October 9th, 1831, Governor Capodistrias was assassinated. The monks disbanded the school and left Benedict free to leave Poros and return to Mount Athos, this time to Panteleimon Monastery, just like Simonides said. Let me stop right here. First, please note that I've been able to historically verify Using the 4 levels of certainty and the 4 guidelines, almost every single word Simonides said about his great uncle. That says a lot about Simonides' credibility. Nobody could have looked up all this information and gotten all these answers. It took years and generations of people to pick up the pieces and write about the events. It took until today, when we have access to online maps, photographs, histories, charts, digitized books and testimonies, not to mention translation software. Simonides could have made up a good half of all this, and nobody would have been able to tell until now. So Simonides had perfect opportunity to lie, but he didn't. That's not the way liars operate. Based on what you have just seen, now I'll tell you my theory about the real reason Benedict wrote what we call the Sinaiticus. Consider these facts. 1. Benedict Vissarion taught at the Academy of Ivalic Cadonia from 1784 to 1819, 35 years. 2. The Academy was a hotbed of Enlightenment thought. 3. 3 groups all had the same basic worldview: Enlightenment, Masons, and Revolutionaries. 4. Their worldview had man rising to godhood. 5. The present Bible was not useful to the movement. 6. Benedict Vissarion wanted to make a new Greek Bible and include certain Greek church fathers, including Barnabas and the Shepherd of Hermas. 7. The Shepherd of Hermas clearly had Jesus being adopted as God's son at his baptism, so Hermas fit the narrative. 8. Gnosticism was also about man becoming a god. 9. Gnostic New Testament writings lowered Jesus to just another man. 10. If the Bible were rewritten with Gnostic texts, it would teach man rising to godhood, just like Masonry, Enlightenment, and revolutionary thought. Where, who, and what he taught tells me that Benedict didn't want a Byzantine Orthodox Bible. He wanted a Gnostic Bible that would support the worldview of the Masons, Enlightenment thinkers, and revolutionaries. Benedict Vissarion spent 3 decades compiling a Gnostic-type Bible from whatever Gnostic manuscripts he could find. I believe he wanted to present it to the Russian Tsar as an alternative to their present Orthodox Bible. I believe Benedict created and compiled Sinaiticus to aid the revolution with an enlightened Greek Bible for a new Greek religion and a new enlightened Greek state. And that is why the Sinaiticus in Mark 1 says that Jesus was just a man who confessed his sins, was baptized by John the Baptist, and afterward adopted by God as his son. Benedict never told his true reasons to Simonides. Simonides didn't need to know. He just mentioned the need for a printing press. So dutiful Simonides would do the work, copying from ancient manuscripts into one new Gnostic Bible that Benedict believed would be copied and spread all over the world. This is the best theory I can find that fits the facts. In the next video, I will talk about Simonides' testimony about his own background. And then I'll show how this project was derailed, Simonides was betrayed, and someone else got hold of Sinaiticus. Until then, God bless you and have a wonderful day.